Welcome, I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, Senate committee says decision to enact the Press Council Bill 2018, not aimed at whittling down press freedom, asks media practitioners to view documents dispassionately. Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria and Nigeria Press Organization kick against Nigeria Press Council Bill 2018, describe Senate's move to enact new act as unconstitutional. APC National Chairman threatens to expel ministers from the party over failure to inaugurate boards of ministries, agencies and parastatals. And 27 soldiers killed as Al-Shabaab fighters detonate a suicide car bomb and storm a military base in Somalia.
On Business News tonight, delegates at the second Capital Market Stakeholders Forum in Abuja ask federal government to implement strategies and policies to boost economic development.
And on sports news tonight, Minister of Sport Solomon Dalong insists that the Supreme Court ruling on the NFF leadership stands despite ejection of factional leader Chris Giwa from the Glass House by security operatives.
And from Abuja, police invite Senate President Bukola Saraki to answer questions over Offa bank robbery and gruesome murder of more than 31 persons in April this year.
We begin from the nation's capital, Abuja, where emphasis is being made on the need not to misconstrue the Press Council Bill as a plan to whittle down press freedom. Well, this was stated by Senator Sabi Abdullahi at a public hearing on the Nigerian Press Council Bill. The bill, titled An Act to Repeal the Nigeria Press Council Act 1992 as amended, and to enact thereof the Nigerian Press Council Act 2018 and for related purposes, sponsored by Senator Sulaiman Adokwe, has been a source of controversy in recent times, with the Nigerian Press Organization describing it as draconian and anti-press freedom. The Nigeria Press Organization is requesting that the bill be dropped forthwith, pending the determination of a similar case by the Supreme Court of Nigeria.
The Nigerian Press Council, NPC, was established via the Act in 1992 and given the mandate to ensure the highest ethical and professional standards in the media. The Council is tasked with regulating the activities of the media while protecting the right of journalists. Given Nigeria's current political climate and the role of the media in shaping narratives and driving public opinion, you will agree with me that an oversight body such as the NPC is of utmost importance to the country. Further, evidence is provided in the adverse impact of the so-called fake news on the polity and the potential to heighten tension with respect to the various of national conflict situations currently being experienced in the country. The NPC is in a special position to safeguard Nigeria's democracy from both extremes of the media spectrum. This is why we are working to ensure that the guiding act endows the Council with all the powers it requires in order to carry out its mandate without hindrance. To this end, this bill is an attempt to correct existing deficiencies, revolutionize the NPC, and promote high ethical and professional standards for Nigerian journalists.
Meanwhile, the Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria and the Nigeria Press Organization have rejected the proposed Nigeria Press Council Bill 2018, describing it as unconstitutional. The bodies arrived at the decision after a meeting with major stakeholders in the media, which deliberated on the full implications of the proposed bill. The meeting studied the provisions of the proposed bill in the context of its implication for free speech, press freedom, media independence, safety of journalists, and the right to operate as a business in accordance with the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The groups also noted that a lawsuit instituted by the NPO on the same subject matter was pending at the Supreme Court. A statement by the organization says the bill seeks to incapacitate the media in the exercise of the duties and obligations imposed on it by Section 22 of the Constitution, which is to monitor governance and hold the government accountable to the people. The statement further reads, quote, "The bill seeks to create the impression that the Nigerian media community does not take the issues of ethics and self-regulation seriously, whereas it is a well-known fact that the mechanisms actually exist, including the Code of Conduct of Journalists in Nigeria, the ethics committees of the NUJ and the NGE, and the recently launched Nigeria Media Code of Election Coverage endorsed by the media stakeholders." The statement was signed by the Chairman, Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria, Mr. John Momo, President, Nigerian Press Council, Mr. Nduka Obaibena, President, Nigeria Guild of Editors, Mrs. Funke Egwemode, and the President, Nigeria Union of Journalists, Wahid Odushile. The NPO and BON also alleged that the bill aimed to criminalize journalism practice and incapacitate the media. Now let's take a look at the implications of the bill in a bit more detail. And joining me live from Abuja is the Director of International Press Center, Lanre Arogundade. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. We're told that the bill is not meant to stifle press freedom. I mean, that's what we hear from those who are sponsoring this bill. But what's your impression of the bill?
Well, my impression of the bill is that there are sections of the bill that are capable of actually stifling the press. As a matter of fact, some of the sections of the bill that we find quite objectionable are the ones that seek to criminalize journalism. And what do I mean by this? If you look at section 16 of the bill as proposed, for example, it provides that where a journalist is believed to have committed an offense, that journalist could actually be subjected to what is called a reprimand, which to us is like a form of imprisonment. It also talked about some penalties. So if you look at section 19C of the bill, for example, it talked about the fact that in the course of their duty, the council could compel, a journalist or journalists to hand over, documents. As you know, this is like compelling journalists to disclose their sources. And this is a privilege that is actually protected by law. So if you check the Freedom of Information Act, for example, journalism is one of the professions that is accorded, that privilege of not disclosing their sources. But this bill is saying that journalists could be compelled to hand over, documents. Now, Section 23 of the bill actually talks about imprisonment, of journalists. It talks about fine where you commit an offense of about 5,000 or imprisonment for a period of 6 months. This is quite objectionable because, as you know, already in this country we have laws like laws of libel, laws of defamation, that if somebody feels defamed or libeled by publication in the media, that person could actually go to court. But now a council is about to be given power to sentence journalists to imprisonment. So for us, it's like this is not a council as such, but a law court that will exercise some judicial functions. Yeah, so when you look at these sections, there is also the section there that talks about the fact that if a news medium publishes something and some people are believed to have aided, maybe by mistake. So you talk of a broadcast media, for example, and a statement is issued by somebody else and the producer reads it, that person is quite liable.
Okay,
so for us, if you look at some of these sections, it's more or less an attempt to criminalize journalism.
Can I just cut in there?
Really accept that.
Yes, let me just ask you as well, because some of the reasons this is an issue for the media is regulation, and those who are sponsoring the bill are talking about how perhaps the media isn't as regulated as they should be, which people like you have said is not the case. Let me draw your attention to the section on on the duties of the council, talking about monitoring the activities of the press with a view to ensuring compliance with the Code of Ethics of the Nigerian Press Council. So if they are to do that, this new council that they're expecting to initiate, if they are to monitor their activities, what then should be the role of the NBC, the NUJ, the NGE? You know, is that also a concern for you as well?
Well, it's a concern. Now, let me explain that in the media generally, there are two forms of regulation. You have what we call, self-regulation, in which case professional bodies in the media set up regulatory mechanisms. So, for example, the NUJ has a code of ethics committee. The Guild of Editors also have a code of ethics committee. The newspaper proprietors have what is called the ombudsman. So these, are self-regulatory mechanisms. And recently we had, drafted and endorsed by media stakeholders, the Nigerian Media Code of Election Coverage, which the President of Newspaper Proprietors Association referred to during the public hearing at the Senate today, which it's also a form of self-regulation by the media, saying that we do not want to be irresponsible in the reporting of elections. Now, the other type of regulation is the one that involves, government, that, you bring a kind of state, legislation. What we are saying in that regard really is that we do not want this kind of, press council that looks like a, vestige, of the military period. But let us copy from best examples from other jurisdictions. And in this instance, we have cited the case of Ghana. Now, Ghana has a National Mass Media Commission, but that National Mass Media Commission is actually provided for in the Ghanaian Constitution, and that is in Chapter 12 of the Ghanaian Constitution. And what it says is that the National Mass Media Commission, what that section actually says is that the media must be protected from government interference. This Press Council decree does not protect us from government interference because a lot of responsibilities are tied to the office of the Minister of Information. Whereas in the case of Ghana, it says that even for state media, the managers of state media shall not be appointed by government. So there is a clear difference. And now the National Mass Media Commission of Ghana says that it shall investigate complaints against the media, mediate, and settle complaints. That is what we want. We don't want, a council that has the power, to jail journalists. We're not running away from regulation. Some of us have spent our lives saying that journalists must be professional. We must obey the code of ethics. So if we want to have, government involvement, then let us have a model that is acceptable to us. What we actually want is a constitutional guarantee of freedom of the press. And within that framework, within that context, have, a press council or a National Mass Media Commission to which media stakeholders, voluntarily agree. So in that sense, media professional bodies or media support groups like our own are not running away, from, regulation. But what we are saying really is that we don't want, a law that will be used, to harass, journalists or intimidate the media.
All right, thank you. We do hope to see how this all pans out and plays out in the coming days and weeks. The Director of the International Press Center, Mr. Lanre Arogundade, thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10 tonight. In part two, after the break, lawyers protest alleged police assault on magistrates in Imo State. Police insist they were only performing their constitutional duties. That's in a moment to join us again.